G'day, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to show you what I find to be really helpful when trying to fix piriformis syndrome. Now, this can be a nasty issue for a lot of people, but as always, I think there's a perspective involved in this that I think a lot of people either aren't aware of or completely overlook when trying to solve this long term. Now, if you weren't aware, and I'm sure you are if you've come to this video, but for anyone not aware, piriformis syndrome generally relates to the piriformis muscle, obviously, the muscle that sort of sits in your back pocket almost, but it tends to become quite tender and dysfunctional with a lot of people, and it can contribute to some sciatic nerve-related issues that go down the back of the leg. The reason for that is, for a number of people, the sciatic nerve either goes through the piriformis muscle, it pierces that piriformis muscle, or goes just behind that muscle, very close to that tissue. So if your piriformis is dysfunctional, it can be closely linked to some form of sciatic-related dysfunction. But what is often missed with this issue is that we need to make sure that we understand that this is often a back-related issue first. So yes, you may be experiencing some intense piriformis area pain. That may be the top of your pain and is expressing itself down through the back of your leg. But we need to understand that that doesn't happen by accident on its own. It's generally a consequence of some either covert or completely obvious low back issue at the same time. So the first exercise that I want to go through targets that specific low back dysfunction. So what I'll get you to do is, if you have a tennis ball, a single lacrosse ball, or two lacrosse balls, it doesn't matter. You just want to choose what you feel gives you the best access to the spinal dysfunction that we're about to find. But what I want you to do with the ball is take the ball and place it right down the base of your back just before you get to the pelvic area. Place it right in the middle of your spine and let it roll off to the side that tends to feel sore for you. And like we always do on the channel, I just want to get you to lie down and gently let the ball press into that section of your back. Now, this isn't an exercise where you're rolling around. All I want you to do is find a spot that feels a little bit tight and restricted. If you're not sure what that actually feels like, compare it to the same spot on the other side. What you'll hopefully feel is one side feels obviously a little bit denser, a little bit tighter. The ball doesn't sink in as well on one side compared to the other. We're just spending some time letting the ball press into any muscular tightness, more importantly, any joint restriction in this area that could be putting a handbrake on your low back function, pulling some slack out of that sciatic nerve and including that piriformis in the conversation. Now, all I want you to do here is just spend a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you feel is worthwhile. Once you've had enough, then gently move the ball up a tiny little bit, maybe an inch or a centimetre or two. Go looking for the areas that feel the most involved for you. With any luck, you may hit a spot that generates or connects to that piriformis syndrome that you've been feeling. It may connect to your leg pain, it may increase your leg pain, it may decrease your leg pain. That's obviously a dead giveaway that the spot that you're on is very important to the makeup of your current pain. And if you stay on that spot and it feels like the pain gradually starts to resolve, then you've got to work really hard at making that spot loosen up and feel better so that you can feed some slack into that dysfunctional area. Now, it's really important to understand that if you have a disc bulge that's irritated and inflamed and pushing on the nerve a little bit, this isn't necessarily going to de-inflame that joint. It's not going to de-inflame the disc or get that disc to de-swell or anything like that. But by feeding some slack into the area, you give yourself the best chance of optimizing that function to the best of your ability in the time that you have. And then just keep hunting around trying to find where those bits and pieces feel tight, and then get rid of them, and then hopefully reassess your symptoms to see how that feels and whether you've actually done something to that. So the second exercise that I want to touch on here to help your piriformis syndrome is a piriformis stretch. Now, this is probably an obvious one, you may have done this one before, but I want to go through some nuances to this exercise that will hopefully give you more bang for your buck, make it more effective, and give you a greater chance of instantly improving those symptoms in the moment. Now, we're going to do the pigeon stretch, which is a very basic stretch. It's a very common stretch. So if you are having some genuine pain at the moment, I would recommend doing this on a seat or on a bed where you don't have to get down as deep as I'm about to. But for anyone else, the floor is a great place to explore how sort of tight this is and improve that range of motion. So the pigeon stretch is basically as follows. You want to place your shin sort of at about 90 degrees to your thigh on the ground. Again, if you're on a bed or on a chair, it just allows you to be out of as much hip flexion here. But for me, because I'm relatively flexible, this will hopefully highlight this a lot better. Just make sure that you don't bend your knee quite a lot. Try and keep it at about 90 degrees, if you can see it on the video. It really helps tension up that piriformis. So for me, the goal is to get my knee down to the ground eventually without feeling like I'm sort of rotating and dropping down on the side there. So for me at the moment, with my back straight, I feel like I'm really finding some good tightness here in that back pocket area. But the important condition I want to set for you here is you can turn your trunk towards your knee, you can turn it towards your foot, try and find the exact position that gives you the best access to that tightness. And then the real kicker here to make this more effective is we don't just want to hang out here. It's not a good enough way to make genuine change to muscular tightness. What we need to do instead is tense up that tissue, get your brain and nervous system involved, because when you release that tension, it also relaxes and allows you to go deeper into the stretch. So what I want you to do is find your best version of the stretch. So for me, this feels like it really targets some of that tightness more so for me. I want to gently squeeze my butt cheek. I want to push my foot into the ground, whatever I need to do to make that muscle work. Hold that for 5 to 10 seconds. When I release that tension, lo and behold, I should be able to drop down a little bit deeper than I could before. And I want to chase that as much as I feel I can until either my symptoms start to resolve a little bit or it starts to feel a little bit raw and it's time to pull back for fear of trying to overdo it. Find that really comfortable window where you feel very safe doing this so that your body feels safe enough to give. But ultimately, you should feel like that muscle frees up a lot more just from having done that particular stretch. Now, the third thing that I think is really helpful to do is if we grab that ball again, we actually want to place the ball into that piriformis muscle to try and find any sort of soft tissue muscle spasms or some trigger points that have developed that traditional stretching doesn't quite nail or isn't specific enough to target as much as a ball is. There can also be some fascial restrictions in the area, there can be some neural restrictions in the area that some other stretches don't necessarily affect. A ball is a great way to go hunting for that and free that up. So again, we want to jam the ball into that piriformis area, and it shouldn't be too hard to find on most people, unfortunately. It's generally quite tender. There's a number of different ways we can do this. So if it is quite tender for you, obviously be gentle, do it on a floor that's softer as opposed to a harder floor with a harder ball. It's your responsibility to find a condition here that suits you and feels comfortable enough for you to do. All I want you to do is move the ball around, again, looking for that sweet spot of where you feel you need to be. If you have your leg bent, if you have your leg out straight, it might be a little bit harder to find it. You bend your knee up a little bit, it does put this under a little bit more tension and make this a little bit more obvious. So we want to find that tightness. So I found a really nice spot here for me. So again, you can just stay here, let the ball gently press into that area. Over time, it will start to give. If it's very tender, take some deep breaths. Sigh on the way out. Tell your body that everything's okay. Cue your nervous system into relaxing so it gets this to relax a lot faster. The other thing you can do is by keeping the ball on the spot, you can very, very gently move your hip around. So sort of adducting the hip towards you, letting it fall out, adducting the hip towards you. You can sort of shear some of that tissue free by putting some pressure through it and using movement to shear that free. You can have your leg out straight if you want to and try and sort of rotate your foot up and down again, getting that same rotation through the hip to try and shear this free as well. The other thing you can do is wherever it feels tight, you can tense that muscle in the area that the ball's pressing into, hold that for 5 seconds, again, getting your brain and nervous system involved so that when you stop tensing it, the muscle relaxes a little bit and you can dig in a little bit deeper. So again, if you can repeat that process, hunt around for any of the spots that you feel are a bit restricted and a little bit tender. And then again, ultimately, if you've released some of the right areas, you may find that you get an immediate change in how those symptoms are feeling, particularly the neural stuff as it's going down through your leg. Now, the last thing that I think is really important is any sort of piriformis syndrome or sciatic nerve-related piriformis syndrome generally has that neural component which we spoke about. Now, it's really important to reiterate at this point is that you can't stretch neural tissue. So if you feel like your sciatic nerve is tight, it's more akin to a piece of steel cabling than it is an elastic band. So just stretching it doesn't give you an observable change in mobility because it's generally not tight in the first place. What generally does tend to happen is because the sciatic nerve runs through a bunch of soft tissue channels, if they become tight and restricted, you can get these sort of adhesions or these restrictions and this increasing neural tension, and that nerve doesn't floss through those areas when you move and use your body. So a great exercise to do is a sciatic nerve flossing exercise. So what I want you to do here is I want you to lie down on your back again. It doesn't matter where you do this. You can bend the one hip up to about 90 degrees and reach behind your thigh just like this. We want to try and keep your thigh in the same position throughout. And I'll get you to bend your foot back just to create a bit of pre-tension through your calf and through the sciatic nerve at the base of your leg. And all I want you to do is very gently straighten your leg as far as you feel comfortable. Now, if you're quite symptomatic at the moment, this may feel a little bit uncomfortable to stretch. So please make sure you work within your comfortable limit of tolerance. But once you've done 10 or 15 of these, if you take note of where your foot gets to at the start of the exercise, by the 10th or the 15th one, provided you haven't moved this thigh at all, you haven't brought it towards you any further, you should actually feel like your foot's going further and further back each time, or at least further at the end of the exercise than it was at the start of the exercise. But again, once you've done that, you hopefully feel like there's a tangible change in your symptoms in ways that maybe other exercises didn't necessarily address. So I genuinely hope that was helpful. Hopefully those 4 exercises give you some more to work with, some more things to add to your sort of playbook of exercises to try and fix this piriformis syndrome. Let me know down in the comments below which exercise, if any of them, made you feel significantly better or gave you the best results. If you found this video helpful, please consider leaving a like rating down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want more information like this, please even consider leaving a super thanks donation. It's a great way to support me and the channel and allow me to keep doing this, making these videos going forwards. But ultimately, I genuinely hope that that helped you in some way, and then we'll see you in the next one.